The first statement over here, machines will save us. That makes sense to me because in terms of content moderation, there's just so much content out there, it's hard to keep it all straight, and machines are the first level of filtration, right? Before it gets to people. It makes sense to me that eventually we'll have to replace the people because they only have a couple of seconds to moderate the content, look at things. Eventually, machines are going to take over and kind of be, no, I don't mean it in that sense, but machines will be able to do more effectively what humans are now being stretched to do. Tell me about this a little bit. Why is this wrong? It makes sense to me.
It's really funny that you open up with that because y'all have probably seen Black Mirror, right? Do you know the episode with the social credit system? And
yes.
It's just judging everything you do ruthlessly? Yeah, that creeps me out too, right? It creeps you out. So that's not what's going to happen. The reason we're even addressing this myth requires us to take a step back and have a conversation as to why it is we need machines to help us with solving some of the problems we see online, okay? So everyone in this room has probably heard of a term called content moderation, right? And what that essentially is a coordination between technical experts and policy specialists to come together and identify, flag or notify, and address, usually remove, harmful content online, right?
What is harmful content?
Well, it depends on who you ask,
yeah.
right? And that's why partnerships are really important to have that conversation. We, as Google, cannot determine that. You, as Sid, cannot determine that.
I try.
Yeah, sorry. But partnerships in this is really key to answering this question. So I work at Google. As you know, I have to plug my mission, because it's a cool mission, I think. We aim to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, right? So a big part of making it useful is accuracy and scale. Okay, so I know I'm taking a while, but this is important because the scale part is where we need the machines, and the accuracy part is where we need humans, and I think we'll always need humans for that. Because I think we've all had a social media post that was taken down, but the reason that was cited was because of something that really wasn't with the spirit of what we posted, right? And you're thinking, why was this taken down? And it's precisely the nuance of context that machines aren't really good at doing and gathering, to be honest.
But as AIs and machine learning, as that gets more advanced, won't they be able to detect the nuance and to learn from that? Because, I mean, for example, androids, robots, whatever, they were obviously fake in the past, and now, especially with advanced chatbots and things like that, it really can feel very similar to talking to a human.
Yeah, it can.
They can get pretty close to passing the Turing test, for example. So don't you think eventually they'll be able to learn so well that they'll be able to detect these nuances?
Well, you're getting into the field of futurism now, but for where we are right now, I can almost assure you that we're nowhere near that. Because ultimately, even though our chatbots get better, our image recognition gets better, and we have AI that makes art now, that is still going to be based on data, on information that is publicly available and can only be determined and classified based on whatever it's given. However, we as humans are capable of creating new things that aren't necessarily always based on previous experiences, right? We have imagination. And so while our systems will always get advanced, there's always going to be an upper threshold that will require human creativity. And so let me actually give you an example. So I have a friend from the States, I'm from the States, and I live in London, and he came and visited me, and we decided to take a day trip to Cambridge University. It's a gorgeous town, medieval streets, it's really lovely.
Never heard of it.
Oh, yeah. And we took a boat tour, and on this tour, we had a tour guide that was telling us an interesting piece of information. So when we were passing the St. John's College of Cambridge University, it's a beautiful college, our tour guide told us that apparently this college was an explicit order by Hitler himself to be protected from the bombing plans during the Nazi bombing campaign. So apparently, we were told, Hitler himself said, I love this college so much, I want it to be the UK headquarters of what I do if we win this war, and he made the order to protect it, right?
It was very big of him.
God.
He doesn't get enough credit.
I don't know about that. But my friend and I are sitting there having a conversation about it, thinking, wow, we didn't know that piece of information. That's really interesting. You don't really hear about that when you hear about the history of this time, right? Well, it turns out that was actually an urban legend. It's actually not true at all, and I don't know what my tour guide was even talking about, but he probably shouldn't be a tour guide anymore. But either way, my friend went on a social media platform and posted about it and said, wow, I just learned this really cool, interesting fact about Hitler, the Nazi bombing campaign, and St. John's College at Cambridge University. Well, it's not that 2 hours later, his post was flagged and removed for talking about false information. It was flagged and removed for talking about promoting hateful groups.
Oh.
So it's interesting, though, right? Because even though he was talking about it in his post within the context of being educational, and I learned something new, and he had all these other kind of keywords to tip off any type of machine that, hey, I'm talking about this in an educational way, the machine still took it down. Maybe there was a classifier or a machine learning model that picked up the other keywords, right?
The fact that he was using the word Hitler raised a flag.
That's what I can assume, to be honest. And so I think that's an illustration of the context and nuance that it only gets more and more granular as you talk about more and more complex things. And there's going to be a limit at which a machine doesn't actually know how to interpret that nuance, right? And that's where we need people. And similarly, at Google, we actually have a categorization called EDSA, and that's educational, documentary, science, and art, which actually includes journalistic intent. And so maybe there are terms, there are video footage from a war zone, potentially, that shouldn't be shown to a broad audience because it's just too graphic, right? But if it is showing a current event or something with educational or scientific value, then people should have access to that, right? Because we want to ensure that people have access to information and there isn't an over-removal, like we saw in the case of my friend, on information that is just interesting, even if it wasn't a fact in his case. So ultimately, this is why I think the machines will not save us.
So this is overhyped.
Yeah, I would say.
Okay. Well, I'm convinced. Guys, are you convinced? If you're convinced, make some noise. Great. I think we're ready to smash this. Okay. I think I need something to break this with. I'll be right back. Cool.
Of course.
How about this, huh?
Okay.
All right. Guys, are we ready to smash this myth? Make some noise. All right, let's do it.
Cool.
That feels good, I'm not gonna lie.
I'm sure. I could do some of that on my own. Yeah.
That's definitely not my haters' faces. I have healthy coping mechanisms.
There you
go. Now let's move on to the second one. Just take all the bad stuff down. This sounds like a good thing. There's generally a consensus that there's a lot of harmful stuff on the internet, especially disinformation. I mean, we experienced this a lot during COVID. I know personally because I'm Indian, I got spammed by all of my family members about different healthy remedies for COVID, like, just breathe in the air from a lavender and then you won't have COVID. I don't know, it's stupid.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that should be taken down. We can all agree we should take the bad stuff down, right?
I agree with taking the bad stuff down, but I think we need to be careful because we can imagine where determination of bad and good and all of it can lead us down some tricky paths, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose two statements to the audience, and if you agree with one or both of the statements, just raise your hand. We can make noise if we want. Do you want to make noise? I don't know. Okay, raise your hand if you agree with one, the other, or both statements, okay?
Can I play?
No, you're not included.
Come on.
Wait your turn. So, I want my values represented in what gets determined as good or bad content online. Okay? I want my values represented in how it's decided what is good or bad content for me online. Really? Wow. Okay. I was worried at first. Wow, you don't want your values represented in that? Okay, thank you. All right, next one. I think that governments, tech companies, and the people should together decide what is good and bad content online. Okay, that one got more. Okay, maybe the phrasing of the first one was a little off. Anyways, but even if you didn't raise your hand, and I would actually be very curious to know why, so follow up with me afterwards. Even if you didn't raise your hand, I think it's important to recognize you have to take a balanced approach to governing content online, right? Imagine if you had a council of your grandmothers, and they were the only ones who were responsible for telling you what is good and bad content online, and you had to go with that, right? That's not representative, right? They're gonna have different sensitivities, they're gonna have different attitudes about things. So this is where collaboration is key. I know I've mentioned it, but seriously, collaboration is really key here. So an example of this, right, is when we're talking about misinformation. And we have information that people may know to be true, may not know to be true. How do you understand verifiable information, right? If it's not or if it is. So at Google, we actually have a balanced approach to issues like this, right? And we call them the 4 Rs. They're 4 levers that we pull to strike the right balance between content removal, raising authoritative content, and so on. So the first R is called remove. We set responsible rules for all of our products and services, and if there's behavior or activities that go against those rules, we take that content down.
What kind of stuff goes against those rules?
Well, it can be pretty spectacular stuff, right? It could be child sexual abuse material. That's not easy stuff. It could also be COVID vaccine misinformation. So these are policies that we're constantly iterating upon, and we're consulting with experts all around the world to create. We also comply with local law and legal obligations to take content down as well. So next, we have reduce. We reduce content that would otherwise be recommended by our systems because it's harmful. And again, harmful is something that is determined by a collective, not just us. We have the engineering capacity, you have the real-world insights, governments have a perspective, organizations have a perspective. This is something that we're coming together to define, right? And then
Constantly evolving, or?
Always.
Yeah?
Always. We have regular meetings all around the world with local health authorities, elections authorities, you name it, to determine what is helpful, what is harmful, okay? And then we also use reduce with raising high-quality content or high-quality information that is really helpful and authoritative and verifiable, because we don't want there to just be a void of information. We want to fill that void with verifiable information. Then lastly, we set really high standards for people who publish or creators on our products and services so that they're rewarded for the high-quality content that they promote. Because at the end of the day, are we a business? Yes. Don't get me wrong, we're a business. But we do not want to make money off of harmful content. So this is why it's a balanced approach to not just taking all of it down, because what does that lead to potentially? It can lead to censorship. It could lead to over-removal. And back to the first myth, it could lead to a lack of nuance, right? And that's what makes our human lives as complex and awesome as they are.
So you're saying it kind of makes cultural narrative a little bit more sterilized, one-sided maybe, not representative.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we want to hear different ideas. We want to have an intellectual battle in the public forum of different opportunities online, right? And if we just relied on removing and taking everything that hurt everyone's feelings down, then we wouldn't have a conversation, period. And so I think to grow and to encourage intellectual discourse, new experiences, so that someone who's seeking information on, yes, what the vaccines are like, can get the right information, get verifiable information, but they can also share their ideas about, you know, I don't know if I agree with the way my local city council approached this issue, right? And so that's why we have to take that balanced approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I thought I had you with the first one. I thought I had you with the second one. You've convinced me again. Guys, are you convinced? Make some noise. Okay, I think we're ready. Okay, this myth is smashed.
There we go. That's really shocking. Every time it happens, I just have a jump.
Well, get used to it. Okay, now we're moving on to the third one. We need a silver bullet. You've got to agree with that, because right now, most people would tell you that the internet is a pretty toxic place, and it's gone way too far. Way too many people are getting a platform. We need a silver bullet. We need to figure out how to put an end to all of this. That's got to sound right to you.
So what you're saying is you want one solution to rule them all. Is that right?
One solution to find them.
Okay, so we're doing the Lord of the Rings thing? Okay, so I wish, Sid, I desperately wish that that's how the world worked, that challenges that we face have one solution. You know, if you just pull the right lever or deploy the right algorithm or move the right people around, all of our problems will be solved. Anywhere from climate change to housing crises, there's never going to be one answer. And so this is why we have to take an approach that's multifaceted, multidimensional, and address the abuse cycle, because there is a cycle, and it's always evolving at every stage, right? So who remembers, and I really hope there are people who remembers early internet when everyone had a homepage and music and sparkles everywhere, and if you clicked on a pop-up ad, it would just destroy your computer, right? It would fill it with more viruses than a wild animal, honestly, and it was just awful, right? Well, those type of ads have now evolved into your occasional crypto investment scam ad, or lose that belly fat tea that you see in like marketing campaigns, right? So that is a description or an illustration of the evolution of abuse. People are always finding new and creative ways to get ahead of each other, right? And if you take a step back and think about it, is that not just the human condition? We're creative. We use these creative brains to help our neighbors, to fall in love, but also to rip each other off, to be honest. We like ripping each other off. And so we find new ways to do that, right? And so that is why when you have a very serious case like a child who wants to go online to learn about the world or to grow with her peers, but she ends up in a chat room with an adult who is saying things that they should not be saying to that child, that is a complex series of prompts, problems, decisions, information that may have led to that outcome, right? And so there's no one way to address that, especially when it comes to something like prevention, but also to address it after it's happened, because we don't even want it to happen in the first place.
I mean, maybe the silver bullet is elaborate. Maybe it's got lots of parts to it, but are you telling me that there is no
solution, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, there are plenty of solutions. There's no one solution.
What if we combined all of them to make one sort of comprehensive law, regulation, something like that, terms and agreements, click agree?
I really wish the world worked like that, because I think it's safe to say different countries agree on different ways on the right way to address a problem, right? When it comes to misinformation, when it comes to even violent extremism and who gets counted as a violent extremist, it's actually a very sensitive and nuanced, very varied interpretation. So if only there was one way we can all come together and agree. Maybe you should talk to, people that have power and say, hey, can we agree with the world on how to address child abuse? I would love that. I would honestly beg you to do that. But we come from different backgrounds, we come from different beliefs, and that's why we have to be very precise in how we do things in different places, right? So an example of how you have to address abuse from a multi-dimensional, multifaceted way. Actually, one of my favorite examples comes from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, in the early days of the conflict, Google Maps and Google Search wanted to provide helpful, again, useful information to the refugees that were fleeing the war, right? And so that wasn't something we could do alone, because we know how to do it from an engineering perspective. We have some policy experts as well. But we also needed the help and employed the help of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine and the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees. We helped out with Reuters. We also worked with the Red Cross. And so we had each of these organizations and their own specific expertise contribute to the different life cycles and the different elements of the life cycle of the abuse that these refugees could possibly experience, right? Whether it's from a health perspective or a safety perspective or from an information perspective. And so actions like that, in addition to creating what we created is called the air raid alerts. So we actually repurposed earthquake alerts, high or low latency technology. We repurposed that into providing air raid alerts for Ukrainian refugees, right? And so that's something we know how to do. We have the technical know-how to do, but we also know how to deploy that. We have to know how to use that on the ground. And so that's why we worked with the Ukrainian government to do that. And so it takes people from multiple angles to address an issue, whether it's a refugee crisis or child abuse, or just the accidental text that your grandma sends you about something about smelling lavender for preventing COVID. You know, we have to take multiple paths of addressing that. Right. You could do more research. You can stop and think and ask yourself critical questions. You can ask for the authority. Who is telling you this and why are you believing them, right? These are all different steps you can take that are different slices of the pie to have different solutions, but helpful solutions in a sum of addressing abuse online.
So it's like a shared responsibility. It's not just, you can't just rely on a government or a company. You also have to think for yourself and see what makes sense.
That's right.
I thought I was gonna walk out here and just completely dominate all of this, but I've got egg on my face, and I'm a little bit embarrassed because we're recording this. You know what? You've humiliated me.
Wow, okay.
But would you like to do the honors of smashing the last one?
I would be deeply honored.
Yeah?
Wow, thank you.
Get a firm grip on it. It's kind of heavy.
Okay.
All right. This myth, guys, are you ready? Make some noise. Amazing. This myth is smashed. Oh my God. I bow down to you. Okay. Thank you very much for coming here. Guys, give a warm welcome to Anita Williams. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.